Alien Queen chooses the humble human to save her empire and reveals his hidden strength. The galaxy was on the brink of destruction. The once powerful alien empire, ruled by the Queen, faced its darkest hour. Enemies from across the stars gathered in numbers too great to count. The Queen had tried everything. She had sent her best warriors into battle, her wisest strategists had devised plans, and her most trusted allies had failed to deliver. The empire was collapsing and time was running out. In the grand halls of the royal palace, the alien Queen sat, staring into the endless stars outside her window. Her mind raced as she pondered a solution, but nothing came to her. The advisors around her waited in silence, knowing that the Queen had already dismissed every idea they had given. She had lost faith in them. "Your Majesty," one advisor said nervously, breaking the silence. "Perhaps we should send a new army." "No," the Queen cut him off, her voice cold. "We've tried that. They are too strong, too many. Our armies are too weak." The advisors exchanged worried glances, their faces filled with uncertainty. None of them dared to speak further. They had never seen the Queen so defeated. Her strength, once unmatched, seemed to be slipping away. But then, without warning, the Queen stood up. Her eyes narrowed, focused on something no one else could see. She moved quickly, her footsteps echoing through the chamber, and approached a large ancient relic, a sphere that glowed with a mysterious light. The Queen gazed at the sphere for a moment before she raised her hand. The sphere hummed as if reacting to her touch. She whispered words that no one understood. The room grew colder and the very air seemed to shift around her. The relic responded, sending a pulse through the air that stunned everyone present. The advisors watched in confusion. What was happening? What was she doing? One by one, the advisors stepped forward asking questions, but the Queen didn't answer. Instead, she stared into the glowing sphere, her mind locked on one thought: the human. The advisors had heard of the human, an unknown, humble species from a small, insignificant planet called Earth. The humans were weak, by galactic standards. They lacked the technology, the power, the skills to make any real difference. But something about them intrigued the Queen. Something about this one human. She had heard stories of a man, no more than an ordinary human, yet somehow there were whispers of his potential. Whispers that hinted at something greater, a power hidden beneath the surface. The Queen could not ignore it. The sphere glowed brighter, and suddenly the Queen's voice filled the room. "I choose him," she said firmly. The human. The advisors were stunned. They had expected the Queen to choose one of their own, one of the greatest warriors or strategists of the Empire. But instead she had chosen a human, a species they had long underestimated, a species they had considered unworthy of their attention. "Your Majesty," one of the advisors spoke up, trembling. "Are you certain?" "A human? They are weak. They have no power." The Queen turned to him, her eyes sharp. "Do not question my decision. This human will save us, you will see." The room fell silent. No one dared challenge the Queen's will. But they couldn't understand. They couldn't see what she saw. What did she believe about this human that they didn't? What could he possibly offer that their finest warriors and strategists couldn't? The Queen turned her back to them, walking toward the chamber's exit. "Prepare him," she ordered. "The human will come." The advisors stood still, their thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. They had no idea what the Queen saw in this human, but if she believed in him, they would follow her orders. They had no choice. The next few hours were filled with preparations. The human, who had been living a quiet, simple life on his home planet, had no idea what awaited him. But fate had already set its course. He was about to be pulled into a conflict far beyond anything he could imagine. He would face trials and challenges that would test him in ways he could never prepare for. And if the Queen's vision was true, he would rise to become something more than anyone could predict. But for now, the only thing that was certain was the strange sense of calm the Queen felt. She had chosen him, and that was all that mattered. The human would come, and the Empire would change forever. The journey to the alien Queen's palace was long, and the human had no idea what awaited him. He had lived a quiet life on his planet, working simple jobs, minding his own business. He never asked for anything extraordinary, never dreamed of traveling across the galaxy or being part of something larger than himself. Yet here he was, pulled from everything he knew, now headed to an empire far beyond his imagination. He sat in a small metal ship, staring out of the window as stars blurred by. The ship was silent, its interior cold, and he could feel the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. He had been told nothing. No explanations, no warnings, just a single command. Come. For the first time, he questioned the decision that had brought him here. Why had the Queen chosen him? Why not one of her warriors or generals? He wasn't anyone special. He had no extraordinary abilities. His life had been simple, peaceful, and now everything had changed. His thoughts were interrupted when the ship came to a sudden stop. The pilot, a tall alien with scales covering his face, turned to him. We've arrived. The Queen awaits. The human nodded silently, his heart racing. The alien didn't wait for him to speak. The door to the ship opened, revealing the massive structure of the palace. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, with towering spires reaching toward the sky and strange glowing symbols etched into the walls. It was beautiful but also intimidating. Follow me, the alien instructed. He stepped out of the ship, feeling small beneath the towering palace. They walked through the halls, the air thick with the scent of something foreign. The further they went, the more the human felt the weight of the Empire's power. There was something about this place, something ancient and full of history. It felt like the very walls were alive, watching him, judging him. Finally, they arrived at a grand chamber where the Queen stood, her back turned. The room was vast, with high ceilings and shimmering lights reflecting off the walls. She turned as the human entered, and for the first time he saw her face clearly. The Queen was beautiful, imposing, yet graceful. Her eyes, filled with an intensity he had never seen before, locked onto his. "Welcome, human," she said, her voice smooth yet filled with authority. He tried to speak, but words failed him. He was unsure of what to say. He had no idea why he was here or what was expected of him. His mind raced, but nothing came out. "I'm sure you're wondering why I've brought you here," the Queen continued. "You are not like the others, but you will be tested. You will prove your worth or you will leave." The words hung in the air and the human's stomach tightened. He had no idea what kind of test she meant, but he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. There was something about her presence, something that made him feel like he was meant to be here even if he didn't understand why. The Queen stepped forward, her gaze never leaving his. "You will face trials. The first will test your strength. You will fight in the arena." The human blinked in surprise. Fight? He was not a fighter. He was just an ordinary person. He had never trained for battle, never learned how to fight. The thought of facing alien warriors in a battle to the death terrified him. But before he could speak, the Queen held up her hand. "Do not fear. This is not what you think. The arena is not about physical strength. It is about the mind. You will face your greatest fear. Only by confronting it will you prove your worth." The human was silent. He didn't understand. What did she mean by confronting his fear? What fear could he possibly have that would matter here? Without another word, the Queen turned and motioned for him to follow. He walked behind her, unsure of what was to come. The corridor stretched ahead, leading them to a large circular chamber. The walls were lined with strange symbols and glowing lights. In the center of the room stood a pedestal upon which rested a small glowing crystal. The Queen approached the pedestal and turned to face him. "Touch it. It will take you to the arena." The human hesitated, then reached out. The moment his fingers made contact with the crystal, the world around him blurred. He felt his body jerk forward as though he were being pulled through time and space. The next thing he knew, he was standing in the middle of an open arena. The air was hot and the ground beneath him was cracked and dry. Around him, towering alien figures watched in silence, their eyes filled with curiosity. He looked around, feeling small and out of place. The Queen stood at the edge of the arena, watching him closely. "Face your fear, human. Prove your strength." The human stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't know what to do, where to go. His mind raced as he searched for an answer. And then, like a wave crashing over him, it hit him. His greatest fear was not the aliens around him nor the battle he was about to fight. It was failure. The fear of being weak, of letting everyone down. The fear of not being enough. His hands trembled as the realization sank in. He was terrified of failing, but in that moment something shifted. The fear no longer paralyzed him. Instead, it pushed him forward, giving him the clarity he needed. He would not fail. Not this time. And with that, the arena began. The first challenge had begun, and the human would face it head-on just as the queen had hoped. The human stood in the center of the arena, his heart pounding in his chest. The air around him buzzed with tension as alien eyes bore down on him. He could feel the weight of their expectations pressing against him. They were all waiting, watching for him to fail. And yet in that moment something shifted inside him. The challenge had started, and he knew that there was no turning back. The first obstacle appeared in front of him, a massive stone creature, towering over him, its rocky body shifting with every movement. Its eyes glowed with a fierce, unnatural light. The creature growled, its deep voice shaking the air. It was designed to test his strength, to push him beyond his limits. The human could see that it was no ordinary beast. This creature was made of stone, but its movements were swift, agile, and deadly. It lumbered toward him, its enormous fists raised, ready to crush him in an instant. The human's mind raced. He didn't have the physical strength to fight this creature. His body was not built for war, for battle. He had no weapon. He had no training. What was he supposed to do? But then a memory surfaced, a time from his childhood, when he had faced a challenge that had seemed insurmountable. He had been young then, standing in front of a vast, unscalable mountain. The people around him had told him that it was impossible to climb, that no one could make it to the top. But he had refused to give up. He had taken it one step at a time, slowly, methodically, until he had reached the summit. It hadn't been about strength. It had been about patience, persistence, and knowing when to move and when to wait. And so, with that memory in his mind, the human did the only thing he could think of. He ran, not away from the creature, but toward it. As the stone beast swung its massive fists, he ducked and weaved, his body light and quick. He wasn't trying to fight. He was trying to survive, to outsmart it. The creature's attacks were powerful, but they were also predictable. The human used his agility, his human instincts to avoid the strikes, his heart beating faster with every close call. He wasn't strong enough to fight the creature head-on, but he could use his mind to find an opening. The crowd of aliens watched in silence, their eyes wide with surprise. They had expected him to fall, to be crushed under the creature's weight. But the human kept moving, never stopping, never tiring, and then just as the stone creature lunged, the human saw it, an opening. Without thinking, he sprinted forward, ducking under the creature's outstretched arm and leaping onto its back. His hands grabbed onto the rough stone surface, his fingers digging in, and he began to climb. The beast roared, trying to shake him off, but the human held on. He knew that if he could reach the creature's head, he might be able to disable it. The climb was difficult, but he didn't stop. He focused only on the task at hand, getting to the top. When he finally reached the creature's head, he saw his chance. He found a weak point in its stone armor and drove his hand into it. The creature howled in pain, stumbling backward as the human's forceful strike cracked its head. For a moment it was stunned, giving the human the opportunity he needed. With a final, powerful push, the creature collapsed to the ground, lifeless. The crowd erupted in astonished applause, but the human barely heard it. His heart was still racing, his breath coming in quick bursts. He had done it. He had survived the first trial. The queen stood at the edge of the arena, her gaze locked onto him. There was no expression on her face, no sign of approval or disappointment. She simply watched, as if she had expected nothing less. The human, panting heavily, turned to face her. He had done what no one believed he could do. He had defeated the stone creature without a weapon, without strength, relying only on his mind and his determination. But there was something else that had been awakened inside him, something deeper, something he hadn't even known he had. As the arena began to fade, the human was transported back to the queen's chamber. He stood before her, still processing what had just happened. "Well done," the queen said, her voice calm but filled with something else. Respect, perhaps, or even admiration. "You have passed the first trial." The human said nothing. He wasn't sure how to respond. He had proven himself in one test, but there was still more to come. He could feel it. The queen wasn't done with him yet. "Your strength is not in your body," she continued, her eyes piercing his. "It is in your mind. You think differently from the others. You act differently. That is why I chose you." The human looked at her, still uncertain. "But I'm not like the others. I'm just an ordinary person." The queen shook her head. "There is no such thing as an ordinary person. Not when they have the strength to face what you did today. You have proven that you are more than what you appear to be." Her words struck a chord within him. He hadn't thought of himself as extraordinary, but now, in this moment, he was beginning to see things differently. He had faced a trial he should have lost, but he had won, not because of strength or power, but because of his ability to think, to act when others couldn't. He wasn't just a human anymore. He was someone who had the potential to change the fate of an entire empire. The Queen smiled slightly as though she had seen this awakening in him from the beginning. "There is more to come," she said. "But know this, human. The trials are just the beginning. Your true test will come when you are forced to choose between your own survival and the survival of the Empire." The human nodded, not sure if he was ready for what lay ahead. But one thing was certain: he would face it no matter the cost. The arena had been just the beginning, but the human could already feel the pressure building with each passing moment. His body ached from the trials he had faced, but it was his mind that felt the strain. Each challenge had brought him closer to a breaking point, physically, emotionally, and mentally. He was starting to realize that the true test wouldn't just be about strength or intellect. It would be about his will to survive, to fight for something bigger than himself. The Queen had warned him. The trials would not stop, and as the days passed, each one grew more intense, more brutal. His enemies weren't just the beasts or the challenges of the arena anymore. Now they were the very people he had once admired. Her warriors, the generals, the rulers of the empire. They were watching him, waiting for him to fail. The pressure was relentless, but the human had learned something from each trial. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for his place in a world that had never considered him worthy. This time, the Queen summoned him not to the arena, but to a private chamber. The room was dark, its only illumination coming from the soft, eerie glow of the alien symbols on the walls. The air was thick with anticipation. The human entered the room, his mind already bracing for what would come next. The Queen stood by a window, her back to him. Her expression was unreadable. She had been watching him closely, waiting for the right moment to push him further, and now that moment had arrived. "You've done well," she said, turning to face him, "better than anyone expected. But I fear the greatest test still awaits you." The human said nothing. He had come to expect the constant pressure, the endless trials. But something in the Queen's tone made him pause. There was something different about this challenge. It wasn't just another test of strength or intellect. It was something deeper, more personal. The Queen stepped forward, her eyes intense, searching his face. "You have faced everything we have thrown at you, and you have done so without hesitation. But now you will face something that will break your very soul." The human's heart skipped a beat. What was she talking about? What could possibly break him now? He had already faced the creature in the arena, survived the mind-bending trials, and proven that he had the strength to rise above it all. What more could she demand? "You are about to be tested in a way that no one else ever has been," the Queen continued. "You will face a decision, one that will determine the fate of the Empire." The human listened closely, his mind racing. "A decision? What kind of decision? Do you remember the Empire's enemies?" she asked, her voice growing colder. "The ones who have been waiting for our downfall? The ones who have been at the edges of our borders, ready to strike? They are closer now than ever before. They are preparing for a full assault. And the truth is, we cannot stop them." The human's pulse quickened. He had heard the whispers, the rumors of a war on the horizon, but he hadn't fully understood the gravity of the situation. Now it was becoming clear. "We need an ally," the Queen said, her eyes narrowing. "Someone who can tip the balance in our favor. Someone who can make all the difference. That ally is you." The human blinked, his mind struggling to grasp her words. "Me? I'm just a human." The Queen's gaze softened, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Yes, you are. But you are more than that now. You have proven yourself worthy. You have shown strength, intelligence, and perseverance. You have earned the respect of this empire. But your greatest test will be what happens next." The human felt a knot form in his stomach. What was coming? What did she mean by the greatest test? "There is a secret," the Queen continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A secret that only a few in the Empire know. A secret that could change everything." The human's curiosity deepened. He had come this far without truly understanding why he was here. Why had the Queen chosen him? What was this secret? And how did it tie into the fate of the Empire? "The secret," the Queen said, "is a power that lies within this empire, an ancient weapon that can destroy our enemies in one strike. It is a weapon of unimaginable power. But it is not a weapon that we can control. It requires a sacrifice, the sacrifice of someone who is willing to give up everything for the Empire. The human felt his breath catch in his throat. A weapon of unimaginable power? A sacrifice? What kind of choice was this? The Queen was offering him something that could save the Empire, but at what cost? Was he really prepared to make such a decision? You must choose, the Queen said, her voice growing colder, more determined. Either you can join us and wield this power, or you can walk away. But if you choose to wield it, you will be bound to the Empire. You will never be free again. The weight of her words pressed down on him like 1,000 tons. He was being asked to make a choice that no one should ever have to make. A choice between his own freedom and the survival of an entire empire. Could he really give up everything for the greater good? Was that the kind of person he was becoming? The human looked into the Queen's eyes, searching for any sign of hesitation, any hint that this was not the only path. But there was nothing. The Queen was resolute. She believed in this path. She believed in him. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. This was the moment that would define everything. The moment that would determine not just his fate, but the fate of an empire, of millions of lives. I choose, he said, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. The Queen nodded slowly, her face unreadable. Then the final trial begins, and you will never be the same again. The weight of his decision settled in the human's chest like a stone, heavy and unyielding. He had chosen. There was no turning back. The Queen's words echoed in his mind, her gaze burned into his memory. The final trial begins, and you will never be the same again. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't even a warning. It was simply the truth. The chamber around him seemed to close in, as if the walls themselves were waiting, watching, expecting him to falter. But he couldn't. Not now. Not after everything he had been through. He had already proven that he wasn't just an ordinary human. He was more than that. He had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. He had fought for survival for the Empire, and now he had to fight for something even greater. His own humanity. The Queen gestured for him to follow, her eyes fixed ahead as she walked toward a hidden door. He hesitated only for a moment before stepping forward, feeling the air grow colder as they entered a long, winding hallway. The walls were lined with ancient runes, symbols he couldn't decipher. The further they went, the deeper the silence became, until even their footsteps seemed muffled as if they were walking through a dream. "Where are we going?" the human asked, his voice breaking the stillness. The Queen didn't answer immediately. She simply kept walking, her presence like a shadow at the edge of his vision. "You've made your choice," she finally said, her tone quiet but firm. "Now you must face what comes next." They arrived at a massive door at the end of the hall, its surface covered in intricate carvings. The Queen placed her hand on the door, and it slowly creaked open. The room beyond was dark, its shadows thick and heavy. The air was thick with the scent of ancient metal and decay. It was a place of power, old power, forgotten by most of the galaxy. "Step inside," the Queen instructed. The human hesitated for a brief moment before walking through the doorway. As he crossed the threshold, a cold wave washed over him, sending a shiver down his spine. The room seemed to pulse with energy, and for a brief second, he thought he saw something move in the shadows. But when he blinked, it was gone. The Queen followed him in, her eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "This is the heart of the Empire," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is where the power of our ancestors resides. The weapon we spoke of. This is where it lies." The human's breath caught in his throat. He had heard whispers of such a weapon, stories told in hushed tones by the warriors who feared its power. But to stand in the heart of it all, to feel its presence in the air, was something he hadn't prepared for. "Will you show it to me?" the human asked, his voice barely more than a breath. The Queen nodded and raised her hand. As if responding to her command, a massive stone altar rose from the floor, illuminated by a soft, eerie glow. Upon it lay an ancient relic encased in a crystalline shell. The human's eyes widened as he approached, feeling the weight of history in the very air around him. "This is the weapon," the Queen said, her voice steady. "It is a power unlike anything the galaxy has ever known, and it is yours if you are willing to accept it." The human stood before the relic, mesmerized by its beauty and its danger. The energy that radiated from it was palpable, a force that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality around it. He could feel it pulling at him, beckoning him to claim it. He reached out a hand, his fingers brushing against the crystal. In that instant, the world seemed to blur, the room spinning around him. His mind was flooded with images, visions of destruction, of entire civilizations crumbling beneath the weight of this power. He saw the faces of the Queen's people, their eyes filled with hope as they looked to him for salvation. But he also saw something darker, a shadow creeping over the Empire, a force that sought to twist the weapon to its own will. The visions were overwhelming, and the human recoiled, pulling his hand back. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to catch his breath. "Do not fear the power," the Queen said softly, her voice like a calm breeze in the storm. "It is not the weapon that will destroy you. It is how you choose to wield it." The human's mind was spinning. He had come to this point hoping for answers, but now more than ever he was uncertain. This weapon, this power, was too much for one person to control. How could he possibly wield it without losing himself in the process? "You asked me to choose between survival and the survival of the Empire," the human said, his voice shaking with the weight of the decision. "But what if the weapon itself is the destruction of everything? What if I choose wrong?" The Queen stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "Then we will all pay the price together. But you are not alone in this. The fate of the Empire is not in your hands alone. It is in all of us." The human looked at the relic again, its power drawing him in. He could feel the weight of his choice, the burden that would come with it. He wasn't just deciding the future of an empire, he was deciding the future of everything he had ever known. If he chose to wield the weapon, he would forever be bound to the Queen, to the Empire, to a future where freedom was a distant memory. But if he chose to walk away, what would happen? The Empire would fall. The destruction would be inevitable. The weapon would be lost, and with it the last hope for salvation. His heart thudded in his chest as the weight of the choice pressed down on him. There was no turning back, no easy path. He had already made the choice to fight, to survive, and now he had to make the ultimate decision, whether to accept the power and embrace his destiny, or to refuse it and condemn everything he had come to care for. With a deep breath, the human reached forward once more, his fingers trembling as they brushed against the crystal. He had made his decision. There was no turning back, and as he touched the relic, the world around him exploded in light, the power of the weapon flowing into him, filling every part of his being.